In Genshin Impact, you have to put together a team of 4 characters that synergize well in order to beat up some big bad booty. Just building a team of characters that you like is only going to get you so far. And to be honest, it will get you pretty far. This game was never meant to be mechanically difficult, but that's not going to last forever. And what happens when you do start to face more difficult challenges like weekly bosses, the Spiral Abyss, and even the Imaginarium Theater? You're going to have to put in some level of effort to make a kick-ass team, and Genshin isn't very self-explanatory when it comes to structuring one that makes sense, especially if you skip the tutorials, which, let's be honest, you did. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding about character roles and team archetypes so you can build a team that can work well. So before we could talk about actually making the teams themselves, we have to talk about character roles. Every single character in the game can be categorized into 3 different roles. That's the main DPS, the sub DPS, and the support, with DPS meaning damage per second. The main DPS is the character type that's going to do the bulk of the damage, the most damage per second. They're like the lead singer of the band. Yeah, the team is important, but everyone remembers the lead singer because they stand out from the pack. The main DPS stands out because you're spending most of the time fighting as them and they're doing big PP damage. Sub DPS characters are still doing damage, but theoretically not as much as the main DPS, and they'll be doing it off-field, meaning you won't be spending too much time on them in the rotation. Think of them as like the backup vocals in the band. Supports are the characters that help the rest of the team in some way. They're like the rest of the band, and like sub DPSs, you won't spend too much time on them either. Supports can be further broken down into 3 more categories. They can be healers, shielders, or buffers. Healers are self-explanatory. They heal. Same with shielders, they block incoming damage. Buffers are the golden child of the family. Everyone loves buffers. They increase the stats of the team in some way. Some are general and increase everyone's attack, and some are super niche and increase, say, a specific element's power. Every team should have a combination of these characters, which should be pretty intuitive at this point because, think about it. Say you have 4 supports on a team. One's healing, 2 are shielding, and the other one's buffing everyone's attack. But none of them are doing damage. Yeah, that team is never gonna die with a healer and 2 shielders, but the enemy is never gonna die either. So now you're having like a 10-minute thumb war instead of a fight that you should have won in 10 seconds. But which combination of character roles is the best? Let's break it down. So I went through every team that I use just to figure out how they were structured. And it turns out they were very stable across the board. There's essentially 2 types of teams. The first, which I'm going to call the old reliable team, and the second, which is usually called the hyper carry. So in the old reliable team, this is pretty much the most common archetype of most of the well-known teams. There's one main DPS, there's one sub DPS, there's a support, and there's another of either another sub DPS or a support. A hyper carry team is based around one damage dealer, and you're trying to just help them do the most damage possible. And this usually has 1 DPS and 3 supports. These are essentially the standard team layouts for popular teams and will never steer you wrong. Okay, so now we have a general rule for how to structure a team with general roles. But how do you know which characters have which role? Well, you have 2 options. Option 1 is to read, which I know no one wants to do. You just want to button mash and beat some ass. But you can go into this talent page, say you like Fischl, and go into here and click through these talents, read them, get a feel for what they do, and notice that, okay, so she does damage, it's off field with something called free Kegels, and you don't have to spend time on field with her, and she isn't buffing or healing or creating a shield, so she's not supporting in any way. You could pretty safely assume that she's a sub DPS. Now to me, this is the part of the game that I really like. I like all the sweaty strategy stuff. I like getting into a character, learning them, and trying to figure out where they piece together in a team of other characters that I like. But for those of you who don't like doing that, you have option 2, which is this website. They have a pretty useful guide for every character that's available to play, and I'll link this below. Here, you can just click into Fischl, and it says her role right here, sub DPS. It'll also tell you recommended weapons and artifacts if you're curious about how to build Fischl or other characters. And this is definitely a nice quick breakdown of any character that you want to play. Now, I also made this quick list here of every character from 5.3 and before, and their general roles. So you can pause here and screenshot it if you want to use it later. And as you can see, there are some trends. It looks like there's a ton of 5-star main DPSs, so you're gonna have to pull for these guys. But there's a ton of 4-star supports. All right, so back to building the team. we know that Fischl is a sub DPS. So you can fill her into that sub DPS slot in the old reliable team. All right, so now you just have to figure out how to round out this team with other characters. And in order to figure out which ones, you should keep in mind how Electro works with other elements. This game's combat is very strongly based on how the elements you choose work with other elements. So if you feel like you have good characters, but they're not doing good damage, it could be because the elements you chose aren't really playing well with each other. Basically, you have to focus on elemental reactions. So this is a quick chart that you can use to see which elements work with other elements. Keep in mind Electro because you chose Fischl for your team. So if you come up here, you find Electro, as you go down the list, you'll see that it works together with Pyro to create Overloaded. It works together with Hydro to create Electrocharged. It doesn't react with itself, so on, Cryo, Superconduct, all the way down. So I'm gonna show you real quick what an overloaded reaction looks like. All right, so I have Pyro and Electro on my team. You have to use either Pyro or Electro on an enemy so that they get that symbol above their head. That's how you know they're ready to be reacted with. Now, if you switch to Pyro and you hit with Pyro, you'll see it said overloaded and there was a number there that was the same color. That's how much damage you're doing with overloaded. Now, I used an elemental skill to create that reaction. That damage is that red number right here. So as you can see, Overload's kind of holding it down. So that's what you can base your team off of. Choose a reaction that works with the characters that you have and make a team around it. So say you saw what I just did and you were like, oh shit, I like Overloaded. I want to do Overloaded. Great, now you know you need Electro and Pyro. You also know that you already have an Electro character and a sub DPS. So you need a main DPS, a sub DPS, and a support character. Now the only question is, do you have a Pyro character? If so, add them and check off that role. Say you have Shangling. You know she's Pyro, so let's check out what role she has. We check the list, and bang, she's right here. She's a sub DPS. Cool. Now you can add her to that last sub DPS slot in your old reliable team. All right, so now the last thing to do is just to fill in the main DPS in the support role. So check your list. Who do you have? Gaming and Bennett? Maybe you got Kaching from the standard banner and Toma? Who knows? Make it up. Fill in those slots. And honestly, if you're a bit early in the game or you just really haven't been focused on getting too many characters, just fill in a main DPS and a support role. They don't have to be Pyro or Electro if you don't have them. You can make a lot of teams work. You already have two that are going to cause the reaction anyway. And if those characters happen to be ones that can react with Electro or Pyro, even better. Now you're just making more reactions. Now if you're mid or late game, maybe just choose another reaction where you have all the characters for them. Some of the most popular reactions that people shoot for when they're creating a team are going to be Vape, Pyro and Hydro, Melt, which is Pyro and Cryo, or Hyper Bloom, which is actually 3 elements. For that one, you need Dendro, you need Hydro, and then you also need Electro. A little more complicated than most reactions. So as a disclaimer, these are general recommendations. Team building is one of the most intricate parts of the game, and I know a bunch of people are going to be like, well, I build a team with multiple elements, or even just one element, and it works totally fine. You don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, those work too. As you'll notice, a lot of shit works. I'm just giving a general philosophy about how I sometimes make teams, and what I think would be the simplest or most effective for new to mid-game players. If you are late game, and you want the best teams possible, I could make like a 15-hour video describing them all, but 1, no one would watch that, and 2, this website exists. So say you love Arlecchino and you want to know the best teams, click on guides, find Arlecchino, click on teams. There's really good advice here about team building and then just possible teammates and why they work well with her, and then a bunch of example teams. So if you have them, build this team. You'll do just fine. And honestly, I would recommend this website over the first one for building the character. If you were planning on doing so, you can click on the artifacts and weapons here to see what would be good on those characters. All right, the next thing I want to leave you with is to build an exploration team. You might think it's not very important, and in reality, it's not super important, but it's definitely going to save you time. Now, this team looks ridiculous, but if I'm building a character and I need like 60 mushrooms from Mondstadt, I'm going to want to get around quickly so I can just grab them all. So if you go into a character, their last talent is usually going to be something exploration related. So for Kanich, if you're in Natlan and you pick up a local specialty, his movement speed increases by 15%. Mika's is that he shows unique resources to Mondstadt when I need those mushrooms. Kazuha decreases sprinting stamina consumption by 20%. Fischl's just there to look pretty. But if I'm playing and I need to get a bunch of these, I'm going to give you an example of how quickly I can get to this spot on the map from, say, here, with and without an exploration team. Alright, about 25 seconds. And now I'll show you with just the regular team. "38 seconds. Now this might not seem super relevant, but trust me, when you have to pop around the map, going to a bunch of places just to collect some materials, it's going to save you a lot of time. So I think it's worth it to look through some of the talents, stack a few on the team that would help exploring go a little quicker. Alright, so the last thing I want to leave you with is a team recommendation. And really, it's 3 characters. But this team that you're seeing right now, Changyang, Xingqiu, Xiangling, and Bennett, this is called the National Team. Now, why it's called that, I don't really know. But this is a 4-star team that has been proven time and time again to be rock solid, even through endgame, considering you have the right constellations for the characters involved. And since they're 4 stars, the probability of you having each one is pretty high, which is why I recommend this one. And in this case, it'd be an old reliable team. Support, sub DPS, main DPS. Another reason I'm using this one as an example is because of these 3, Xingqiu, Xiangling, and Bennett. If you have these 3, you have a foundation for a great team core. Bennett buffs attack and heals, Xiangling does crazy off-field damage with Pyro, she's going to react with Xingqiu's rain swords to do vapes, Changyang is going to react with Xingqiu to freeze, also Xiangling to melt. So you have 3 different reactions going at the same time, and if you remember, they are the recommended ones. But as long as you have these 3, you could switch Changyang out for so many different characters, and the team will still kick some ass. You could switch him out for Wriothesley, definitely Kanich, Alhaitham would be fine, Rosaria could work, Ningguang could work, Sucrose could definitely work, Heizo for sure, Beidou, Gaming, Yanfei, Keqing, yada 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 yada, there's so many. I think you get the point. So if you can manage to set that up, you'll be set for a good amount of time. Alright, let's put a bow on this. To put it all together, basically, what you're going to be doing is find a character that you like. Find out what role that character is. Find a reaction they can do, and then fill the rest of the team with people that can round out the roles. And that's what I got for you today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about character roles and the general philosophy about building a team that makes sense. And if you think I left anything useful out, just throw it in the comments. Good luck on the more difficult stuff in the game, like the Spiral Abyss, and thanks for watching. See you for the next one. Ciao.